Cassie here, welcome back to my channel, and today is the beginning of my very first read-along series. We are going to be reading this bad boy. P.S. I Still Love You by Jenny Han. Sorry, it's so glary. So I did already read the first book in this series, the To All the Boys I Loved Before, and I did not thoroughly enjoy that book, which I discussed in a review, which I will post down below if you're interested. So I thought that this book might be a good candidate for my first read-along series, kind of critiquing while reading, because it's if it's kind of on par with the first book, then I would say it's not terrible and it's not going to be like torture to read, but there's going to be enough that I don't like, probably, that I'll have some interesting feedback to share. Because obviously, like, you can't do a critical reading of like The Hunger Games or something, because there's just not going to be enough to critique, in my opinion. And then if you try to do a critical reading of something that's just like utter garbage, then there's just way too much to critique and it just gets boring and repetitive. So hopefully this will be a good start to this series. So I will be reading this book throughout this whole month, so stay tuned every Thursday for new uploads on this series. And without further ado, let's get started on the reading. All right, let's get started on this. So it's been a while since I've read the first book, so I don't 100% remember how it ended. I do remember that by the way, spoiler alert, if you haven't read the first book in this series, or you haven't read this one, then clearly this is not the video series for you to be watching, because I'm going to be reading this whole thing and commenting on it the entire time. So it's going to have spoilers from the first book and from this book. But anyway, I do remember that she picked Peter, like that's the guy that she realized she liked, which I wasn't, I don't know. Peter's just... Watch my previous video about the first book if you want to know what I think about Peter. I think I talked about that more, but I believe the first book ended just with her writing him a note and it said like, "Dear Peter," and then there was nothing, which I was annoyed about because I didn't realize it was part of a series. So I thought that that was like the end of the whole story, and I was like, that's really weird. Like, that's a weird way to end this entire story. It just felt very anticlimactic, but then I discovered that there are more books, so we're gonna keep on reading, and it looks like this one starts out with the note that she's writing to Peter, I think. So yeah, let's see how it goes. Okay, so her little love letter to Peter is nice. I mean, I don't have any like critique of the letter itself. I think that was a cute way to start out the book, and now that I know it's a series, I think that was actually a cute way to end the book and to start the next book. But the first thing I just have to say that does not bode well for me for this story, because I know that I'm pretty certain she ends up with Peter, like in the end. I think I've heard that, and I do remember, at least from the first book, I just don't really like Peter. I don't think he's a very nice guy. Like, I think there were so many things. In fact, okay, there is a video I watched. I can't remember her name, but there was a video I watched of like a critique of To All the Boys I Loved Before, and or maybe it might have just been in another video. It might have just been like characters she didn't like or something, but there's a booktuber who talked about Peter and that she doesn't like him, and like everything she said was exactly how I felt about Peter reading the book. So I'm gonna link that down below. If you want to know how I feel about Peter, just watch her video, because honestly she said it better than I could have, and it's been a while since I've read the first one, so I don't quite remember. But I just didn't ever feel like their relationship was that deep. And I know it's like a young adult romance and it's high school, so it doesn't necessarily have to be super deep, but I don't know. I guess I'm just used to reading stories that have more like depth to them than just like, this boy's cute and I like him, so like it feels like it's been 5 years since we've talked, even though it's been 5 days. Like, she talks about how like she feels like she can say anything to him, and I just didn't really get that from the first book. I mean, maybe I'm just the weird one here. A lot of people really love this book series and love Peter and think he's the best, but I just never really got that whole like, oh, they like understand each other, and I just thought he was not that great, and I didn't really understand what was special about them together as a couple. So I think that's a struggle I'm going to carry into the second book as well. So we will see how that goes. Okay, so right off the bat into chapter 1, there's 2 things that I remember I did not like in the first book. One was that I feel like the character of Kitty is just really hard to understand, like, what age and maturity level she's at. Like, sometimes she seems way too smart for her age, and then other times she sounds like she's talking like a child, and like I just don't quite understand what her like maturity level is. And then another thing is that Lara Jean, the narrator of the story, always refers to her dad as daddy, and it just kind of bugs me. And I know that's just a little petty, nitpicky thing. I call my dad daddy a lot of the time, but I don't call him that literally every time I ever mention him. Like, because that's a little weird. Like, if I'm talking to someone, like, oh, my dad said this, I wouldn't say daddy said this. It's just strange to me. I just never read that, even in a first-person narrative. You'd always see, even if they always call their dad daddy to their dad, if they're narrating the story, it's like they're talking to me, the reader, and you wouldn't normally refer to your father as daddy. You would say, like, my dad said this, not daddy said this. It just sounds really weird, kind of like how I just said sounds. It sounds weird, and I just don't care for it. This line is kind of cute. It says, she's talking to her cousin, I think, and they see a picture of her and Peter together, and she asks if he's her boyfriend and stuff, and then she asks what's his name, and Lara Jean says Peter Kavinsky. Even saying his name is a remembered pleasure, something to savor, like a piece of chocolate dissolving on my tongue. I like that line. I think that's cute. I don't like Peter that much, though, so I don't know if he's deserving of such a beautiful line, but, you know. So, 2 times now she's mentioned just the thought of, like, losing a love that you once had and not having it anymore, being really sad. She said, someone said, all I can say is if that boy was my boyfriend, I'd never let him go. And she says, my whole body tingles when she says those words. I once had that exact same thought about Josh, and look at me now. It's like a million years have gone by, and he's just a memory to me. I don't want it to be like that with Peter. The far-awayness of old feelings, like even when you try with all your might, you can barely make out his face when you close your eyes. And then later she says, she's talking about Margot and Josh, who were together, and then they broke up, and she says, if they don't talk now, the scar will only harden over time. It will calcify, and then they'll be like strangers who never loved each other, which is the saddest thought of all. And, like, okay, from my perspective, as someone who didn't really see that much that was special between Lara Jean and Peter, just saying these 2 things so close by to each other, it just makes me feel like she just wants to be with Peter because she liked him once, or she was with him, so she doesn't want to not be with him because it would be sad. No, I mean, anyone who's been through a breakup where it's like, I know that this person isn't the one for me, but like I still like them, and it's sad to think about ending a relationship even if you know it's not really gonna be going anywhere, because it's just comfortable and familiar to be with them. And I kind of feel like that's where Lara Jean is at. But again, like, it's a very, in my opinion, a very shallow, superficial kind of story, the first book, and like this, just her mindset, the character of Lara Jean, to me doesn't feel very deep. Like, it feels like she doesn't really have a reason to like this boy other than that he's like generally kind of a likable person. So I finished chapter 1. First chapter was basically like she and her sisters and her dad went to this New Year's Eve party with her family, and they have like, you know, Korean traditions and stuff that were mentioned in the party. And then she was talking to her cousin, and her cousin saw a picture online of her and Peter, so they started talking about Peter, and basically it's just her thinking a lot about talking to Peter and whether or not he's gonna like her still, which is fine, there's nothing wrong with that, but it just is a little, again, I just feel like my main critique is that this story to me feels very shallow, and like there's not really anything. There are just so many good young adult romances out there that have more going on than just, I like this boy because he's cute and kind of nice, and like we get along, which they don't even really always get along either. We're kind of fighting a lot all the time. So it's just, there's just nothing like particularly special about their relationship to me. And it's like all the book is about is their relationship, mostly. Like there's not really anything else. Of course, referring to the first book. I haven't read this book yet, so I can't say. But referring to the first book, like that's pretty much it. And there weren't a lot of other interesting subplots, which means that there wasn't a lot of ways to get to know more about Lara Jean as a character, because like usually you kind of get to know more about people through the subplots and what else is going on in their life, and basically my impression of Lara Jean is that she's somewhat shallow, and not shallow in like a snobby, like stuck up kind of way, but shallow in like a just not a very deep thinker kind of way. That was my impression of her. And she likes to bake sometimes, and that's about all I knew of her. So I do remember one of my main critiques of the first book was that there was a whole lot of story at the beginning of the book before anything worthwhile happened. It was like just like so much filler at the beginning, and it was really boring to me. And this is chapter 2, and she's already almost to Peter's house to presumably tell her about her feelings and stuff. So that's better for sure. I like, you know, that she's diving in more, but again, that's probably because it's a sequel, because she didn't need to introduce us to characters and stuff yet, because we already know them. So it makes sense that we'd be diving in more quickly. But that was definitely something, which by the way is an important note. Like, if a reader is bored by your book at the very beginning, they're going to probably start seeing problems in the rest of the book, because they're already kind of like, their mindset is already transitioning from like hopeful anticipation of this might be a good book to like, oh, maybe not, maybe this is boring, I don't know, okay, come on, get to the point. And then you just start to see things with more of a critical mind, which I think is part of what happened to me when I read the first book, because it was just so boring in the beginning and so, like, nothing happening. Like, everything that was happening was not interesting and not important at all for, like, at least the first 6 chapters. And so that, I guess, is a good thing to note, that having a good, strong beginning is important. Not necessarily, like, super powerful first line, like everybody thinks you have to have that great first line. I do really love a great first line, but I'm not gonna not read a book or not enjoy a book because the first line wasn't perfect. But I might not enjoy a book if the first 6 chapters are boring as heck. Then I'm probably gonna start to not have a great frame of mind for reading the rest of the book. So this line says, "I can feel the veins in my wrist pulsing and I'm nervous. I'm so nervous." Now, that strikes me as an odd line because I think the "I can feel the veins in my wrist pulsing" was supposed to be sort of like a showing thing, but then she just says, "I'm nervous, I'm so nervous," which kind of defeats the purpose of, like, showing instead of telling, because you're just telling us also. But also, is feeling the veins in your wrist pulsing, like, a thing? I don't think I've ever felt that in my life. Like, I mean, you can feel it with your other hand, like if you're checking your pulse, but I don't think I've ever just sat there and felt the veins in my wrist pulsing because I was nervous. I don't think that that's a thing that happens to people when they're nervous. So maybe it was important for her to mention that she's nervous, because I did not... I mean, I got that that's what she was trying to get at when she said she could feel the veins in her wrist pulsing, but I don't know, that's just a weird sentence to me. Like, feeling the heart thumping in your chest, like, that's something that happens when you're nervous, or maybe your hands start sweating or something. And again, if you're gonna say that for the purpose of showing, not telling, then you don't need to follow it up with saying, "I'm nervous," because that's the whole point of why you said the thing you just said. So she's at Peter's house and she's telling him, or she's about to start talking to him about her feelings, and she's thinking to herself, like, she's not very happy about his reaction right now because he seems kind of disinterested in talking to her, and she says, like, what did I expect? He'd read my letter and then he'd love me and then we'd kiss and we'd start dating, and then what? How long until he grew bored of me, missed Genevieve, wanted more than I was prepared to give him, bedroom-wise and also just life-wise. Someone like him could never be content staying at home and watching a movie on the couch. This is Peter Kavinsky we're talking about after all. And, like, I get that maybe this is supposed to be sort of like she's judging him and maybe he's not really like that, but it's like, at this point, she's basically declaring that she's in love with this boy, and yet she still thinks this of him. She still thinks that maybe he would just get bored of her and want to go back with his ex because she's looser than her, basically, and that he could never be satisfied with the kind of lifestyle that she wants to live, of just, like, staying at home and watching a movie and doing innocent things. So again, I ask, what do they have then? What is this special connection that they have that makes her, like, so excited to go, like, declare her love for him? Like, I don't get it. It's kind of like an opposites attract thing, only I don't really see what is attractive. To me, it just seems like they are not right for each other at all. Okay, and now she's just, like, instantly pissed at him and instantly, like, never mind, screw him, he's a jerk. It's just, this book is so, it is what it is. It's a shallow romance, and that's fine if people like it for that, but what I don't understand and what drives me crazy about this series is the vast amount of, like, support and love this series gets from people who I think, like, usually have really good opinions about about books and movies. Like recently I was listening to a movie podcast and they were talking about the movie version of To All the Boys I Loved Before, and they compared it to like Mean Girls in like its level of marketability, as like this might be the next big thing that like all the teenagers reference all the time and love. And I'm just like, are you insane? That movie is like nowhere even close to being the level of Mean Girls as far as quality. And I don't get it. I don't get what is so special about this. It's just so shallow to me. She came to his house to declare her love for him, and then the minute she like sensed that he was a little bit cold towards her and that, you know, he seemed frustrated with her, she changed her mind, and instead she just said, I just came to wish you a happy new year and say that I'm sorry for the way things turned out and I hope we can still be friends. And he was annoyed about that and like responded in an irritated fashion. And he said, what are you apologizing for exactly? For kicking me out of your house, or for thinking I'm a dirtbag who would go around telling people we had sex when we didn't? And she says, a lump forms in my throat. When he puts it that way, it really does sound terrible. Yeah, it does sound terrible. Like, this is a thing that just happened. You just very recently thought that this was the kind of guy he is. And I just don't see how you can go from like 5 days ago thinking this guy is capable of that, and then now like being so crazy about him. That to me is weird. Like, even if the guy didn't do that, which he didn't tell everybody that they had sex when they didn't. But I mean, I guess I don't really remember exactly what happened with that. I don't think he said that, but I also don't think he denied that rumor when he heard it. Like, I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, people were saying that they had sex and he was not like denying that, even though it wasn't true, which is kind of a scummy thing to do. But then like they're arguing, he's like, she says she's sorry for both of those things, and he says, and what else? And she says, what else? There is no what else, that's it. And he is like, you know, you're the one who came here, you don't get to force me into accepting your half-assed apology. And then she's like, well, I wish you a happy new year anyway. Now I'm the one being sarcastic, and it sure is satisfying. And then like a minute later, she's like, I was so hopeful this morning. I had such stars in my eyes imagining how this was all going to go. Gosh, what a jerk Peter is. Good riddance to him. Like, what the heck kind of silly drama is this? I understand they're in high school, but I've been in high school, and I was dating a boy that I thought I might marry. Like, we were not like this, okay? Like, I know plenty of people who have had high school relationships, and there are plenty of really great, like, fiction stories out there of high school romances that are not this petty and ridiculous. And I feel like I'm taking crazy pills sometimes when people act like these characters are their, like, OTP, that they're so excited about Peter, like, oh, Peter is bae or whatever. And it's just like, why? They're just instantly fighting with each other and yelling at each other, and she instantly goes from in love with him to screw that jerk, good riddance, you know. And I don't, it's just so, it's immature. And this is how I felt about the first book too. I feel like their relationship is so immature, and I don't understand why other people don't feel that way. So we'll see as the story progresses if it gets better or worse. Oh my gosh. Okay, so new development. A page and a half later, he sees that she has a letter in her hand, and they do like a little wrestly thing, because of course she won't just give it to him. She's like, no, it's just junk mail, it's nothing, I'll throw it away. And then he finally gets it from her, and he reads it, And he says, why weren't you going to give this to me? Why were you just gonna leave? She says, because I don't know, you didn't seem so glad to see me. And then he says, it's called playing hard to get. I've been waiting for you to call me, you dummy. It's been 6 days. And, okay, and then I just read ahead a little bit, and they're like instantly almost kissing, kind of, and it's just like, oh my gosh, like, this is so childish. And I understand that they kind of are children, but no, they're not. They're not children. They're teenagers, and I know plenty of, well, not know now, but I knew plenty of teenagers who did not act like this. I know that some teenage relationships are like this with all the games and the, like, well, you didn't seem happy to see me, so I didn't tell you how I felt, and, well, I was just playing hard to get so that you wouldn't know that I really like you. It's like, what are we, 5? Just say how you feel. It's not that hard. And I know that some people do act like that, but the point is, these aren't just people, these are like characters in a book. These are main characters. Their relationship to me reads like a subplot of characters, like side characters who are annoying as heck because they never just say how they feel, and the main character's like, oh geez, just tell them how you feel already, like, stop being so immature. That's how I feel about these people, and I don't understand why their relationship is so, like, appealing to so many people, because to me it just seems like really immature, but maybe it's just me. Okay, so the rest of this chapter was weird. I'm not quite done with it yet, but so they ended up kissing, or almost kissing, and they're, like, I guess officially back together now, woohoo. And his little brother came out and said that his mom wanted them to come in for some cider. So they came in, and it was basically like your average boring, like, how was your Christmas, Lara Jean? It was really nice. My dad bought my little sister a puppy, and we've just been fighting over who gets to hold him. And my older sister's still home from college, so that's been nice too. How was your holiday, Mrs. Kavinsky? Oh, it was nice, quiet. She points to her slippers. Oh, and got me these. How did the holiday party go? And it's just like, you know, them talking about their holidays. And then after that, she said that his mom laughs again, and then things are silent. My mind is racing, trying to think up potential conversation pieces. New Year's resolutions, maybe? The snowstorm we're supposed to get next week? Peter's no help at all. He's looking at his phone again. Like, the whole time they're sitting here talking, Peter's just, like, on his phone and not paying any attention. And it's just weird. Like, I don't know what. That was just, like, a weird, boring thing. Because now, like, she's standing up and leaving, and it just seemed like there was no point to her coming in to talk to her mom. His mom. I mean, like, I don't know. I'm not sure what the point of that was. Okay, I guess the point was, after that, when they were leaving, Peter got up to go get his keys, and Lara Jean said, like, sorry to drop by unannounced, and the mom said, you're welcome here anytime, and then she said, just be easy with his heart is all I ask. And that, I guess, was to show us and Lara Jean that Peter was actually really upset when they broke up, and, like, told his mom about it, and so she's, like, worried about her son. And so I guess that's so that we can know that Peter actually did care about their relationship, and he wasn't just, like, whatevs about it. So I guess there was a point to that, but the preceding conversation was just a little bit, like, weirdly bland and quick and strange. Okay, so this chapter ends with her and Peter in his car. He's bringing her home, and she asked, did you tell your mom about how we broke up? And he said no, because we never broke up. She said we didn't, and he said no, because we were never really together, remember? And then she says, are we together now is what I'm wondering, but I don't ask, because he puts his arm around me and tilts my head up to his, and I'm nervous again. Like, girl, just ask him. That's kind of an important question to know if you're together or not now, or if you're still like just in limbo land. And then at the end, they kiss, and she says, I kiss him before he can finish, properly, like I mean it. He kisses me back like he means it too, like it's been 400 years. And that just made me laugh. I don't know, that, like, it's just so dramatic, and also just a weird arbitrary number. I feel like it would have been maybe less weird to say like it's been forever or something than like it's been 400 years. Like, I don't know, it's just a weird line to me. Maybe it's just me. And then after that it says, and then I'm not thinking anymore and I'm just lost in the kissing. I feel like that sentence would be stronger if you just said, and then and then I'm not thinking anymore. Because I think the implication, if you're kissing a boy and then you're thinking something like, oh wow, this is really passionate, and then all of a sudden you're not thinking anymore, the implication is that you're not thinking anymore because you're lost in the moment. So to just say, I'm just lost in the kissing is, I think that's another show versus tell example. Alright, so that is the end of chapter 2, and I think I'm gonna pause this reading right now because it's getting fairly late and I've been doing a lot of filming today. So I'm gonna go, and I'll see you in a couple seconds. Bye. Here's another example of telling instead of showing. So Lara Jean just got home from getting back together with Peter, and she was excited to tell her sisters, but then when she came home she found out that her older sister Margot is crying because she went to talk to her ex-boyfriend too, and they didn't get back together, so she's sad. And she says right here, the thing to know about Margot is she never cries. So seeing her cry sets my world and this house off its axis. Everything feels tilted somehow. That sentence is kind of telly to just tell us, like, the thing you need to know about Margot is that she never cries. Like, there could have been better ways to maybe show that this is a weird instance. Like, maybe if Lara Jean was, like, really nervous about her crying and, like, just didn't know how to handle it. Like, I don't know what to do to comfort her because this never happens. That might have been a better way to show, but just telling us is not as impactful. So that's a little writing tip there. There's kind of another telling example right after that, actually. Margot's talking about how upset she is that Josh didn't want her back, basically, and Lara Jean says, I bite my lip guiltily. I was the one who encouraged her to talk to Josh. This is partly my fault. We know that Lara Jean's the one who encouraged her to talk to Josh because that just happened in the book. We watched it happen. So you don't need to tell us that she did that and that she feels partly responsible. Like, I bite my lip guiltily is already pretty clear. Like, we know why she feels guilty because she just told her to talk to Josh and she feels responsible for her crying now. You don't need to also tell us that that's why she's biting her lip. Okay, so this was something that bugged me in the first book when Lara Jean so quickly and easily just stopped liking Josh, and it felt like, really, like, in my opinion, there wasn't enough scenes of, like, her kind of acting like she didn't like him or, like, figuring that out. It was just, like, all of a sudden in one scene, she's, like, sitting by him talking to him, and she's like, all of a sudden, I just realized I don't like this guy at all. And it was like, what? Like, you've been in love with him for years, I think, right? Like, if I remember correctly. And then all of a sudden she's just like, nope, don't like him at all. That's convenient. And then right here, her sister's telling her, like, if there's any part of you that still likes Josh, I don't want to get in the way of that, and you can tell me. And she says, oh my gosh, I don't like Josh Gogo. Not like that, not at all. And he doesn't like me like that either. I think we were both just missing you. That's not true. You liked him for years before she and before Margot and Josh were even dating. She liked him. So it's so not true that she was just missing Margot, and that's why she liked him. She liked him forever, even before Margot left for school. So it's just like, I feel like kind of the same feeling that I felt in the first book, when I felt like the author was just like, okay, I want this girl to be with Peter now, so she has to stop liking Josh. But she didn't really give any good reasons for her to stop liking Josh. It was just like, I don't like him anymore. And then now it's like she's rewriting history and saying that the only reason she even liked Josh in the first place was because they both missed Margot when she left for college, which is not true. And we know that's not true because we read the freaking first book. So, I don't know. That is annoying. Oh no. Margot just mentioned Lara Jean's friend Chris, and I forgot about that character, and I did not like her at all. She is super annoying, really stereotypical, and just not a well-written character, and not a likable character. And I'm not looking forward to having to experience that character again. Alright, so Lara Jean comforted Margot, and they talked about boys and sex and being careful with your heart, and they're going to sleep. And I'm gonna stop there because my stomach's growling and I'm hungry, which is classic telling right there. I just said my stomach is growling. I don't need to also tell you that I'm hungry. Y'all know what stomach growling means. So there you go. There's one last writing tip for you before I head out for breakfast. I'll probably read some more of this later this evening, so I will see you then. Alright, so that is going to be it for this week's video. I was just editing it and it's capping out at about 40 minutes, and I don't really want to go too far over that, so I'm going to cut it off here, and we will continue the reading of P.S. I Still Love You next Thursday, so stay tuned for that. If you liked this video and you want to see more stuff like this from me in the future, please give it a thumbs up so I know how y'all feel about it. And if you want to be alerted when I upload next week's video continuing this series, make sure to subscribe. Also, be sure to let me know in the comments below what your thoughts are on this book, if you've read the first book or the whole series, if you like Lara Jean and Peter, or if you hate them. Let me know if you agree with me or disagree with me, and we can chat about it. But for now, that is it for this week. I'm gonna go to bed, and I'll see y'all next time. Bye!